The cry was not just a child's cry, it was sharp, raw, and unsettling. It carried down the marble hallways of Golden Blossoms Academy, the daycare of Korea's elite. Teachers exchanged uncomfortable glances, parents clutched their children closer, and whispers spread like wildfire. Inside one of the polished glass rooms sat a little boy, Han. He rocked back and forth, clutching a worn dinosaur toy against his chest. Tears streamed down his small face, his sobs echoing like sirens in the silent room. His father, Min-jae, arrived just in time to witness the scene. He had rushed from a board meeting, his phone still buzzing with unanswered calls. He froze when he saw Han curled in the corner. "What happened to my son?" Min-jae's voice was sharp. A teacher stepped forward, her tone coated in false professionalism. "Mr. Min-jae, we've spoken to you before. Your son, he struggles to fit in. Today during art class he made loud sounds, then shouted when another child laughed. It scared the class." Another teacher added coldly. "We cannot keep making exceptions for him. This is a prestigious daycare. The other parents are uncomfortable." The words hit like knives. Han wailed louder, his little body shaking as he buried his face in his father's suit. Min-jae bent down, gathering him into his arms, whispering, "Appa is here. You're safe." But his own voice trembled. One of the mothers, draped in luxury jewelry, muttered under her breath but loud enough for him to hear. "All that money, yet he can't even raise a normal child." Min-jae stiffened. Rage boiled in his chest, but what could he do? Money couldn't silence cruelty when it targeted his son. He left without another word, his son clinging desperately to his neck. Outside in the car, Han's sobs slowly quieted into hiccups, but Min-jae's heart remained heavy. That night, Min-jae sat in the darkness of his penthouse, overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. His empire stretched across Asia, hotels, tech companies, real estate. People bowed when they saw him. Reporters called him untouchable. But behind those glass walls, he was just a father who couldn't protect his little boy. Han lay asleep in his room, curled around his dinosaur. Min-jae sat by the window with a glass of untouched whiskey, replaying the teacher's words. "Your son doesn't belong here." He remembered the other schools, the endless cycle. Each time he enrolled Han, it ended the same. Rejection. Whispers. Pitying stares. Sometimes outright cruelty. He thought about his late wife, who had died giving birth to Han. People had called Han cursed. The child who killed his mother. Others said Min-jae was paying for the ruthless way he built his empire. But when Min-jae looked at Han, he didn't see a curse. He saw innocence. A fragile soul trapped in a world too cruel to understand him. The next day, Min-jae tried again. He visited 3 more schools, each one more polished than the last. At the first, the principal refused after 10 minutes. "We lack the resources for children like him." At the second, a teacher whispered, "He frightens the other kids." At the third, a director bluntly said, "Mr. Min-jae, with all respect, you should consider sending him abroad. Korea isn't ready for that." By evening, Min-jae was exhausted. Han clung to him silently, his eyes swollen from crying. For the first time, Min-jae considered giving up. He drove aimlessly, past neon lights and crowded streets, until he found himself in an unfamiliar neighborhood. That's when he saw it. A small, worn building wedged between a laundry shop and a bakery. Its sign was hand-painted. Little Seeds Daycare. It looked nothing like the grand academies he knew. The paint on the walls was chipped, the windows a little crooked. But through the open door, he heard something that stopped him in his tracks. Children laughing. Not polite giggles, not rehearsed smiles for rich parents, but genuine, full-bellied laughter. Something inside him whispered, "Try." He stepped inside cautiously, Han clutching his hand. The floor was covered in colorful mats, the shelves stacked with toys, second-hand, a little worn, but well-loved. The walls displayed messy crayon drawings with names proudly scrawled underneath. The air smelled of freshly baked bread, not chemicals. And there she was. A woman with warm brown skin and long neat braids, kneeling on the floor with a group of children. She clapped her hands in rhythm as the children sang in mixed Korean and English. Her smile lit up the entire room. This was Ruth. When she noticed Han hiding behind his father's leg, she didn't rush over or raise her voice like others had. She simply lowered her gaze, humming softly, a tune unlike anything Min-jae had ever heard. It was an African lullaby, gentle, rhythmic, soothing. Han stiffened, clutching his dinosaur. But slowly, his rocking stopped. His breathing eased. His head tilted as if listening. Min-jae held his breath. Ruth reached out, not to touch Han, but to offer her hand palm up. After a long pause, Han stepped forward and placed his dinosaur in her palm. Min-jae nearly choked. His son never gave that toy to anyone. Ruth smiled warmly. "Hello, Han," she whispered as if she already knew his name. She placed the toy back into his hands carefully, as though it were a treasure. Then she looked up at Min-jae. "I'm Ruth. Welcome to Little Seeds." For a moment, Min-jae couldn't speak. He was used to suspicion, judgment, rejection. But here was a woman who looked at his son not with fear, but with patience. "I've tried everywhere," he finally said, his voice low, raw. "Every school. Every daycare. No one wants him. They all say, he's too difficult." Ruth studied Han, who was now sitting calmly on the mat beside her, tracing patterns with his toy. Her smile softened. "He's not difficult," she said. "He just speaks a different language. And the world hasn't learned how to listen yet." The words struck him deeply. For the first time in years, Min-jae felt a glimmer of hope. But what he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that this small decision, to step into Little Seeds, would ignite a storm. Because in a world obsessed with power, image, and perfection, Ruth's little daycare would soon become the center of attention, and not everyone would be kind. The next morning, Min-jae dressed Han in his favorite blue sweater, the one with tiny dinosaurs embroidered on the chest. Han clutched his toy tightly, his small fingers wrapped around it like a lifeline. Min-jae tried to smile at his son, but his heart pounded with fear. Would this daycare be different? Or would it be another disappointment, another heartbreak? They arrived at Little Seeds daycare just as the sun rose. Unlike the luxurious academies with chauffeurs lined up and maids carrying designer bags, the entrance here was humble. Mothers and fathers in simple clothes chatted cheerfully as they dropped off their children. Some came on bicycles, others on foot, their kids skipping happily beside them. When Min-jae stepped out of his sleek black car, heads turned. Whispers filled the air. He was used to this. His face was often in newspapers, his name tied to business empires. But here, his wealth didn't matter. The children didn't care. They only glanced curiously at Han, then went back to their games. Inside, Ruth greeted every child by name. "Good morning, Jean. You look so bright today. Miyum, I see you brought your pink bear again." Her voice carried a warmth that wrapped around the room like a hug. When she spotted Han, she lowered herself to his eye level again. No rush. No pressure. "Good morning, Han," she said softly, as if greeting an old friend. Han shifted nervously, but when Ruth hummed the same African lullaby from yesterday, his shoulders relaxed. He didn't smile, but he didn't cry either. For Han, that was a victory. "Would you like to sit with us?" she asked, gesturing to the circle of children. Han hesitated, then clutched his dinosaur and shuffled forward. Min-jae watched in disbelief. Normally, the sight of many children overwhelmed Han. He would scream, cover his ears, or run. But now, though his eyes darted nervously, he stayed. The class began with music. Ruth strummed a small guitar, her voice sweet and strong. The children clapped and sang along. Han at first only rocked gently, but Ruth, noticing, tapped the rhythm softly on the floor near him. Slowly, Han copied her, first with his fingers, then with his whole palm. Min-jae's throat tightened. It was such a small thing, his son keeping rhythm, but for him, it was a miracle. During break time, Ruth invited Min-jae to sit with her. She poured him a simple cup of tea, the kind without expensive brands or golden spoons. "You're surprised," she said gently. Min-jae chuckled bitterly. "I'm more than surprised. I've taken him to the best schools in the city. Places with therapists, specialists, the latest technology. But no one has ever reached him like you did. Ruth sipped her tea calmly. It's not about money or equipment. Children like Han don't need to be fixed. They need to be understood. They see the world differently, and that's not a weakness. It's a gift if you know how to guide it. Her words sank deep. Min-jae stared at her, humbled. He had spent billions expanding his empire, but never once had he thought of his son's uniqueness as a gift. Why do you do this? He finally asked. Ruth's smile faltered slightly, her eyes growing distant. Because I couldn't have children of my own. The admission was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried weight. When I found out I was barren, Ruth continued, every man I loved left me. In my culture, a woman without children is often seen as useless. I cried for months, asking God why. But then I realized maybe my purpose wasn't to give birth to one child. Maybe it was to love many children. Children the world rejects. That's why I started Little Seeds. Min-jae was silent. For the first time, he understood the depth behind her gentleness. Ruth was not just kind, she was someone who had turned her own pain into strength. Days turned into weeks, and Han blossomed in Ruth's care. He began humming songs, then softly singing along. He danced clumsily at first, then with joy. He even learned to share toys with other children. One afternoon, Ruth organized a small play. The children dressed in paper crowns and capes, pretending to be animals. Min-jae sat nervously at the back, expecting Han to panic. But to his shock, Han stood bravely on stage with the others. When it was his turn, he shouted proudly, "I'm a lion!" His voice wasn't perfect, but it was loud, clear, and filled with joy. The other children clapped. Ruth smiled at him like a proud mother. Tears blurred Min-jae's eyes. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen his son this happy. But not everyone was pleased. One evening, as Min-jae prepared to leave with Han, he overheard two parents whispering near the doorway. "Did you see that boy? The billionaire's son. They say he's autistic." "Yes. My daughter told me he sometimes shouts. What if he hurts the other kids? I don't like it. And that African woman, what does she know about raising Korean children?" Their words twisted like knives. Min-jae wanted to confront them, but Ruth approached calmly, her face unreadable. The parents quickly smiled and pretended everything was fine, but their eyes were sharp with judgment. That night, as Min-jae tucked Han into bed, the worry gnawed at him. What if the whispers grew louder? What if people attacked Ruth, the only person who had ever understood his son? A week later, his fears came true. A group of wealthy parents marched into Little Seeds one morning. They demanded a meeting with Ruth, their voices filled with anger. "We pay fees for our children to be safe," one shouted. "Your daycare is small, but we respected you until you let him in," another sneered, pointing at Han. "Autistic children are unpredictable. He's a threat." Han, who was quietly playing, froze at the harsh words. His lip trembled. For a moment, it seemed he might break into screams again. But then something unexpected happened. Han dropped his toy and ran, not to his father, but to Ruth. He wrapped his small arms around her waist, pressing his face against her side. In a shaky voice, he whispered, "Teacher Ruth, don't cry." The entire room went silent. Ruth's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She placed her hand gently on Han's head and looked the angry parents straight in the eyes. "This child is not a threat," she said firmly. "He is a gift. And if you cannot see that, then perhaps it is not he who doesn't belong here, but you." Min-jae's chest swelled with pride. For years he had fought alone for Han. Now, for the first time, someone else was fighting too. He stepped forward, his voice commanding, "If any of you believe my son doesn't deserve love, then you will deal with me directly. And let me warn you, no amount of money or status will protect you from the truth." The parents fell silent, their arrogance melting into discomfort. One by one they left. Ruth bent down and kissed the top of Han's head. "You were so brave, little lion." And for the first time, Han smiled. That night, as Min-jae drove home, he replayed the moment over and over. His son, once silent and fearful, had found his voice, not in front of billions, not in front of his father, but in front of the woman who had given him the one thing money never could: patience. Min-jae realized then that Ruth wasn't just a teacher. She was the key to Han's world. But as he would soon discover, the world outside wasn't done with him yet. Whispers had already begun spreading in the city. Whispers that would soon turn into storms. The storm came faster than anyone expected. At first, it was only whispers. Wealthy parents at fancy cafes complained in hushed tones. "Can you believe it? A billionaire's son in that tiny African woman's daycare. She's using the child to get close to him. Don't you see? It's a trap. My son told me the boy screams sometimes. What if he attacks someone?" The whispers turned into phone calls. Phone calls turned into gossip blogs. And soon, the story broke into the tabloids. Billionaire CEO Min-jae Cho sends autistic son to African woman's shabby daycare. Is this neglect or madness? Min-jae's assistant rushed into his office, pale and trembling, holding the newspaper. "Sir, the board wants to discuss this. Shareholders are uneasy. They're saying your choices make you look unstable." Unstable. The word stung. He dismissed the meeting and drove straight to Little Seeds, anger burning in his chest. But when he arrived, his fury melted into confusion. Inside, the children were laughing, chasing bubbles Ruth blew from a small plastic wand. Han was in the center of it all, his eyes bright, his laughter loud. For once, he wasn't on the sidelines. He was part of the circle. Ruth caught Min-jae watching from the doorway. She smiled faintly, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. She had seen the tabloids too. Later, as the children napped, she spoke quietly. "They're not really angry about Han, Min-jae. They're angry about me. An African woman, daring to raise Korean children, daring to succeed where they failed." Her voice didn't shake, but her hands fidgeted with the edge of her dress. "I've been called many things before, outsider, barren, useless. But this is different. They'll come harder now, because they're afraid." "Afraid of what?" he asked. "Afraid of the truth," Ruth said softly. "That love and patience matter more than money and status." The very next week, angry parents stormed into Little Seeds. "We're pulling our children out unless you remove him," one man shouted, pointing at Han. "He's dangerous. He screams, he throws things. That woman is manipulating you, Mr. Min-jae. She's after your fortune." Han shrank behind Ruth, his little hands clutching her skirt. His breathing grew fast, his eyes darting. Ruth knelt beside him, humming that familiar African lullaby. Slowly, Han's trembling eased. His small voice whispered, "Teacher Ruth, don't let them take me." Something inside Min-jae snapped. He stepped forward, his presence towering over the crowd. "Enough." His voice was sharp, the voice of the man who commanded empires. "You call my son dangerous? Then hear me, the only danger here is your ignorance. He is not a burden. He is my pride. And if you cannot accept that, take your children and leave. He will stay." The room went silent. The parents exchanged uneasy glances. Some stormed out, dragging their children behind them. Others stayed, shame flickering in their eyes. Ruth touched Han's shoulder gently. "You were brave again, little lion," she whispered. And this time, Han smiled through his tears. But the battle was far from over. A week later, television reporters appeared outside the daycare. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed forward. "Mr. Cho, is it true your son is violent? Why trust an unqualified African woman instead of trained professionals? Is this a publicity stunt? A billionaire pretending to care about common people?" Min-jae shielded Han with his arm, fury blazing in his eyes. But before he could respond, Ruth stepped forward. Her voice was calm but firm. "This daycare is not about wealth or race. It's about children. All children. Han is not broken. He does not need fixing. He needs love. And every child here deserves the same." The camera's word. Some reporters scoffed, but others listened. A few even lowered their microphones, their faces softening. That night, the broadcast aired across Korea. Some mocked her, calling her the barren African pretending to be a mother. Others praised her courage, saying she spoke truth in a society obsessed with perfection. But enemies are not only strangers. Sometimes, they are closer than expected. The following day, one of Min Jae's closest business partners requested a private meeting. "You need to distance yourself from that woman," the man warned. "She's a distraction. Investors are nervous. If this continues, your empire will crumble. Don't throw it away for charity." Min Jae clenched his fists. He thought of the empire he had built, the years of ruthless deals, the nights spent working instead of holding his son. He thought of Han crying in luxury schools, rejected over and over. And then he thought of Ruth, kneeling on the floor, humming until Han calmed. Teaching him to dance. Teaching him to smile. If he lost his empire but kept his son's happiness, would that really be a loss? "No," Min Jae said finally. "I will not distance myself. In fact, I'll do the opposite." The next week, he announced a massive donation to expand Little Seeds into a foundation for children with autism. His press statement was bold. "My wealth means nothing if I cannot use it to protect the most vulnerable. Ruth is not only qualified, she is extraordinary. And together, we will create a safe place for every child rejected by society." The announcement shocked the nation. Some praised him as a hero. Others mocked him, calling him sentimental and weak. The stock market dipped slightly. Investors panicked. But Han danced that night. In the small daycare hall, he spun clumsily, singing along to one of Ruth's songs. His laughter filled the room, pure and unshakable. For Min Jae, that was worth more than every dollar he had ever earned. Still, danger lurked in the shadows. One evening, Ruth closed the daycare late. As she locked the doors, she noticed a group of women across the street, watching her with cold eyes. She heard the hissed words carried by the wind. "She's ruining our schools. She doesn't belong here. She'll pay for this." Fear twisted in her stomach. She had faced rejection before, but never hatred this sharp. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "Lord, give me strength." Inside her bag, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Min Jae. "Stay strong, Ruth. We're in this together." She closed her eyes, her heart steadied. She was not alone anymore. The chapter closes with a powerful image. Han, standing in front of the daycare's small mirror, practicing the dance steps Ruth had taught him. His reflection beamed back at him, smiling, a smile the world had once tried to crush. And in that reflection, Ruth saw not just a boy, but the promise of a new future. A future worth fighting for, no matter the cruelty, no matter the cost. Because behind every cruel eye, she believed, there was still a heart waiting to be changed. The night was unusually quiet in Seoul, but inside Ruth's small daycare, the echoes of laughter still lingered in the walls. Young Min's giggles had filled the rooms earlier that evening as he danced clumsily but joyfully, showing off the moves Ruth had taught him. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't the autistic boy people rejected. He was simply a child, happy and free. Junho stood by the window watching Ruth as she packed away the toys. His heart tightened with an unfamiliar ache. For years, he had built walls around himself, business meetings, contracts, bodyguards, wealth. Yet in this small, modest daycare, a woman who had been broken in her own way managed to heal what he thought could never be fixed. But that night, something happened that would test them both. The unexpected storm. The following morning, as Junho prepared to drop young Min at Ruth's daycare, he received a call that sent chills down his spine. "Mr. Kong," his assistant whispered nervously over the phone. "A story has leaked online. Reporters claim your son was dumped in a poor African woman's daycare because no prestigious center could handle him." Junho froze. His heart raced as he opened his phone to see headlines splattered across every media outlet. "Billionaire's autistic son rejected by luxury daycares, now hidden away in slums? African woman exploits Korean tycoon's son in her business?" The words cut deep. His son wasn't a business strategy. Ruth wasn't some opportunist. But the world was cruel, and money always drew envy. When Junho arrived at Ruth's daycare, paparazzi cameras were already flashing outside. Reporters shouted questions. Is she your mistress? Are you paying her to babysit your son? Is this charity, Mr. Kong, or desperation? Ruth stepped outside, shielding Young Min with her own body. Her hands trembled, but her eyes blazed with fire. Listen to me, she said firmly. This child is not a burden. He is not a scandal. He is a boy. With a beautiful soul who deserves love, not headlines. Her voice carried across the street, silencing the crowd. But not everyone was moved. That evening, one of Junho's close business partners visited him privately. Cut ties with that woman. The man sneered. People are laughing at you. You're a billionaire, Kang Junho. Why disgrace yourself with a barren foreigner running a shabby daycare? Junho clenched his fists. Because she treats my son like a human being. He snapped. The man smirked. Love won't protect your empire. Those words echoed long after the man left. Junho paced his mansion, torn between his empire's image and the happiness of his only child. He remembered the times Young Min returned from luxury daycares with scratches, tears, and bruises. He remembered his son rocking silently in a corner while expensive teachers labeled him too difficult. And then he remembered Ruth, kneeling beside Young Min, guiding his hand, whispering softly, "You are safe here." His choice became clear. The next morning, Junho shocked the entire city. He held a press conference, not in a skyscraper ballroom or a luxury hotel, but inside Ruth's daycare. With cameras rolling, he stood beside Ruth and Young Min. "My name is Kang Junho," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I am a father first, and a businessman second. My son, Young Min, is autistic. That is not a shame, it is his gift. But society failed him. Wealth failed him. Prestige failed him. Only here, with Ruth, did he find love." The room fell silent. Reporters exchanged uneasy glances. Junho continued, "You call her barren, unworthy, a foreigner. I call her the reason my son smiles again. And today, I am announcing a partnership. Together, we will open a chain of inclusive daycare centers across Korea, places where no child is ever rejected for being different. We will call it the House of Light." Gasps filled the room. Some clapped, others whispered, but the decision irreversible. Months passed and the House of Light centers began to rise in different neighborhoods. Children with disabilities, once hidden and shamed, found a place to laugh, sing, and learn. Ruth became a symbol of courage. Junho became more than a billionaire. He became a father who fought for change. And Young Min? He blossomed. His words grew clearer, his laughter louder, his steps stronger. One afternoon, in the middle of a children's dance recital organized by Ruth, Young Min ran to the stage, pointed at her, and shouted for the first time in public, "Mom!" The hall went silent. Ruth's knees buckled. Tears streamed down her face as the boy wrapped his arms around her. Junho placed a hand on her shoulder, his own eyes wet. "She may not have given him life," Junho whispered, "but she gave him love. And that makes her more than a mother." The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras clicked, but this time, no one dared twist the story. That day marked the birth of something greater than romance, greater than wealth. It was the story of three broken hearts finding wholeness in each other.
Hello besties, in this powerful story we learned that true wealth is not found in money, luxury or status. It is found in compassion, patience and love. The story of the Korean billionaire, his autistic son, and Ruth shows that kindness can break barriers that money cannot. No amount of riches could teach the boy how to feel safe, smile and be loved, but one woman's selflessness did. It teaches us never to judge people based on their conditions, backgrounds, or struggles. Every child deserves understanding, not rejection. Every person deserves dignity, not cruelty. Ruth's journey also reminds us that even in our own brokenness, we can become a source of healing for others. Besties, at the end, the greatest gift in life is not wealth or power. It is the ability to love, to be loved, and to transform lives through kindness. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe, and share.